In the last video, I referenced this guy, an Army survival instructor, talking about urban survival. The video is almost entirely about equipment, but he does make the offhanded comment that you have people with you. Because of course you do. Survival is a group activity. And he's right. People don't do well by themselves. They go crazy. They talk to volleyballs. When we pick up the narrative of human beings in history, they are already living in tribes. People need people. Our key verse, the passage that insists that everyone who puts biblical principles into practice takes on hero-like abilities, doesn't say 1 equals 20, not 1 to 100. It has 5 taking on 100. It has 100 taking on 10,000. There's a reason for that. In Season 1, Episode 1 of Doomsday Preppers, we're introduced to a couple that built a survival compound in the Rocky Mountains. It's a great compound. Our Army survival instructor couldn't do any better. They have food, tools, weapons, water, escape routes, you name it. Now, the show has so-called experts who grade the preppers. They're not experts, not on collapse. They actually grade the compound guy down for not having an alarm system. Guys, if it's the end of the world, then who is responding to the alarm? These are somebody's security specialists. They don't understand collapse. The compound guy does. In a sort of academic way you might read in a survival book. But he's got a problem. The episode shows him interviewing prospective couples to join him and his wife at the compound. And from the little bit of video showing the Q&A, we see that he wants people who work hard and aren't addicted to any drugs. But other than their collective belief that society is falling apart, there's nothing to say that these people have anything in common. And that's a problem. You see, historically, the groups of people that weather hard times have a common set of beliefs and values. Think of the Pilgrims. Externally, there was a major learning curve for dealing with food production and climate in the New World. But internally, there wasn't all that much strife, because they all believed pretty much the same things. When questions arose within the group, it was easy to arrive at a mutually agreed upon solution. You can have the best compound on planet Earth, but if everyone in that compound has a different set of beliefs and values, it's going to be very hard to arrive at a consensus on things like how to divvy up food when supplies run short, or tackling problems like how to deal with the couple that's not doing their fair share of the work. Groups with very different values are groups characterized by mistrust and paranoia. I promise you, if the compound guy is still around when society collapses, once problems arise in his community, he will very much regret giving guns to some of those people and inviting them into his little setup. The judges, as a group, are extraordinary people doing extraordinary feats. As I said in the first video, they are the heroic icons of the Hebrew world. But when we look at modern societies, we see that all of them are founded on this 100 to 10,000 principle. The average American city has about 1 police officer actively patrolling for about every 2,000 citizens. Most people would expect it to be much higher, but in reality, if you live in a municipality with about 250,000 people, then you probably only have 20 to 30 officers on patrol at any given moment. How do 20 guys maintain authority over 250,000 people? Because the problem people they have to deal with aren't unified. I've been doing it for 26 years. 95% of the time, you're dealing with just a single individual. Most of the rest, you're dealing with 2 or 3 at the most. Even when you're breaking up a fight, these people aren't unified against you. There's the very rare circumstance where the criminals you're dealing with are organized, like a biker gang, and that's a whole different ballgame that can turn into a chaotic and dangerous situation very, very quickly. Now, what that means is that if you've got 100 folks all unified under a single ideal, you might be able to fend off 10,000 simply because those 10,000 all represent a bunch of different factions. A little external pressure, they all turn against each other, or just run away. The basic story of Gideon is something that anyone familiar with the Bible has heard. Gideon was a local leader at a time where, as the book of Judges constantly reminds us, Israel had no king, everyone did as he saw fit. It was the Wild, Wild West. The angel of the Lord appears and tells Gideon to take on the nomads that are pillaging the region at the time. Gideon wants a little proof that this is God talking to him. The fleece gets wet, the fleece stays dry. Then the stage is set. Gideon puts out a call and gets thousands of followers. God says, that's too many. Gideon sends some home. Still too many. This time he is told to only take the ones who lap water like dogs. I'll get to the significance in a minute. The result is that he's only left with 300 warriors. against a mass force of thousands of nomadic tribesmen. How can he attack when so badly outnumbered? His men attack at night, and they only take 3 things: a trumpet, jar, and a torch, along with their weapons. The ram's horn trumpet to make a sudden loud noise, the torch to set tents on fire, and the jars to cover the lit torches until they're near the enemy camp. Why does this work? This is why.
They just do this, all these movies, they just sort of charge into each other like horseless lancers. They just sort of mash into each other, like no regard for anything. And then like, when people ask me, like, so in a battle like this, like, how would you know which one is on which side? Like, how would you know who to stab, basically? Like, yeah, you wouldn't, obviously. If it went down like this, you would have no idea.
That's a military historian explaining the obvious. How could they tell each other apart in a melee? Later armies would have distinctive uniforms and battle standards, and even then it could be tough. For these nomadic tribesmen, it would have been impossible. They couldn't tell who was attacking them, and so they lashed out blindly and wound up attacking each other. So what's the point of this message? We talk about diversity being a strength. Okay? Well, this was an example of what it looks like when diversity actually was a strength. Israel at the time was a patchwork of settled farmers, city dwellers, and also some semi-nomadic herdsmen. In the ancient world, the settlers tended to very much look down on the nomads. As I explained in my Amalekite video, the word Amalekite means water lapper, literally one who drinks water like a dog. These were Israelites who were still culturally living like Midianites and Amalekites. They would have looked like them too. This is why God sends these against the Midianites and Amalekite nomads. It would have further added to the confusion. It looked like they were attacking each other, and so they started actually attacking each other. In this moment, it was a literal strength of Israel that they still had culturally nomadic people living among them. Today we talk about diversity all the time. Unfortunately, it's not much of a strength at the moment. You see, since our society is abandoning our principles that this culture was founded upon, all that remains for us to make an ethical code is for people to compare themselves to each other. The only way you can make yourself look good in that kind of context is by making someone else look bad. And no one can ever be good enough in this scheme. At the moment, we keep seeing people like J.K. Rowling here, once an icon of liberality. Now, like other feminists, she's been shunned for the high crime of defending women's rights, and in the service of that, stating that there is, in fact, something that can be defined as a woman. Objective definitions are not allowed. Can't be. Not if everyone is going to define everything for themselves. For the men who followed Gideon, the battle with the Midianites and Amalekites would have been life-changing. Up until this moment, they would have lived on the outskirts of a society that didn't like them even before other nomadic raiders began showing up and devastating their lands. And while that was going on, they would have been ostracized even further, just like we did to our Japanese-American population after Pearl Harbor. But once those Israelite nomads literally became the hand of God driving off the swarms of Midianite and Amalekite nomads, then there's every reason to think the Israelite public opinion would have changed. It did here in America. The civil rights movements of the 50s and 60s stemmed directly from the contributions of minorities during World War II. If they were good enough to fight alongside us, how are they not good enough to also share all of our rights and privileges? The Israelite nomads under Gideon would have been hailed as heroes. So they drank water straight from the river. So what? Aren't we all unified under an all-powerful, all-gracious, all-loving God? And so we arrive at superpower number 3. I don't need to say that we're not going in for modern, put everyone down ethical code. Not going in for the modern craziness was superpower number 1 back in the first video in this series. Number 3 is that if you can find and stay connected to a group of like-minded people, all devoted to a higher calling, then you have something that will give you a tremendous advantage going forward. Believe me, increasingly, everybody is just going to be broken up into smaller and smaller factions. This is David Reichert from The Bunker. Click like and subscribe and click the notification bell and we'll try and keep the videos coming. Also, see the link below to order Book 1 of the Holocaust Engine series, our pandemic post-apocalyptic horror that won the Pinnacle Award for the best science fiction novel of 2020.